let me ask you one question. I want to see if it got through. So we talked about the cave. We're not going to do the whole thing. These were, what did we call these? The prisoners. And then these were the puppeteers. And then somebody came back in, having left, came back in. This is the liberator. So I want to make sure the basics got through. Whom do these represent? So here is the allegory. This is life. This is us. Each one of these things represents something in life. As always with an allegory, there's things in the allegory and then they stand for something else. So what do the prisoners represent?
People.
With who?
Us.
Us, exactly. This is us. Whom do they represent? Teachers. We're going to call them educators. True educators or false educators? False. I said fake. Why are they fake? Why aren't they real? Within the allegory, what are they doing that's false?
Like the purpose for that indication here is just like aimed for just like, I don't know how to say, fluency, or just like to make it fluent, to make it understandable. That's it. So there's no kind of true purpose such as idea or God or sun, stuff like that.
Yes, so that's a very deep interpretation. I just want first the superficial within the allegory. What is it that they're doing that's fake? It's so obvious you might not think it needs to be said, but it will be worth it.
あまりにも当たり前すぎてもう言うこともないと思うかもしれないんですけども、この
I'll remind
教
you,
育者たちの
this is a model of a tree. What are they doing with this model? Shadow, exactly. The fire is casting a shadow. And so this is what the prisoners see. And what do the prisoners call that? Do they call it an image of a tree?
手伝って制作された方は何て呼んでましたか？
Do the prisoners say, there's an image of a tree?
そのイメージのことをどうだとか。
No, they don't say there's an image of a tree. What do they say?
Tree.
There's a tree. So their mistake is that they think image equals reality. They've been there since childhood. This is the only thing they know. To them, it's real. So what makes these educators fake educators? They're presenting images as if they were real. And thus they're tricking or deceiving. Are there any questions about that? Okay. Who is this, the liberator?
Socrates.
In this dialogue, yes. But generally.
True teacher.
True teacher, exactly. This is an educator. True. Real. Fake or false. So this is us, and we have to choose between true education and false education. The thing is that it's hard for us to choose because we think this is real. This person isn't on the screen, so we don't see, in the allegory, we don't see that person. We don't see even the models, let alone reality. This is what we call the paradox of education. That what we are presented from childhood is fake. what we want is real, but how do we access that which we cannot see? So that's just the summary. We did 3 hours last time. That's the cave in 5 minutes, 7 or 8 minutes. And I'm happy to go to book 1, but I just want to make sure that the basics, the fundamental structure of that allegory is clear, because the entire dialogue is based on that. So with that said, are there any questions?
言ったことは大丈夫ですか？何か質問なり、言われたことそのもの分からなかったとか、なんとなく顔見てると大丈夫ですかね？私好きな人ですから。
While they're thinking, I'll say something to Tadashi just based on the title of your book. The images, they're not really images of trees. Who cares about trees? They're images of 3 things, especially. The self and value, 2 things. So, last time we talked about person alpha versus person beta. Does person alpha think, I'm sitting in a chair, I'm trapped here watching images? No. Then the trick wouldn't work. The trick is, where does alpha think alpha is? Alpha doesn't think, I'm here. Where does alpha think alpha is?
Standing points or looking at true tree.
Yes. There's an image of alpha. And alpha's looking at a tree. And so when the real alpha says, there's a tree, he doesn't think, I, whom trapped, see a tree. He thinks, I see a tree. That's a fake self. That's not who he is. That's who he is. But crucial to the illusion, it won't work otherwise, is that the puppeteers trick him into thinking that's who he is, that self. But that self doesn't exist. This is one point of contact with Buddhism, is that there's no self. That's an illusion. Now, Plato is different from the Buddhists because Plato thinks there is a real self. So that's, of the many images, the entire world, I mean, this is reality. It's an image of reality. But within reality, the 2 big illusions are illusions about who we are and illusions about what's good, what's valuable, and especially what's just. These puppeteers, these false educators, they teach us who we are, but that's not who we are. That's a lie. And these puppeteers, these false educators, they teach us what's good, but it's not really good. It's a lie. So the dialogue will investigate value, starting with justice, and selfhood, who you are, to find out, who are you really? What is justice really? What is really good? But in order to get to what justice really is and who you really are, you have to start with the lies. What do we think we are? What do we think justice is? That's what book 1 is about. What does Cephalus think justice is? What does Polemarchus think justice is? What does Thrasymachus think justice is? They're wrong. Because they're basing their views on this, not on this, namely what it really is. They're telling us about fake trees, so to speak, not real trees. But to get to the real tree, we have to break the illusion. What is education? We read only one passage out loud last time. And that one passage I said, this tells you what education is according to Plato. Remember? What is it? In one sentence. True education equals what?
The memory. The memory.
The memory?
Is that what?
You're onto something. When you say the memory, I'm wondering which memory are you thinking about?
Idea.
Okay. I think I know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of truth in what you're saying, and I'll connect up what I'm looking for with what you're saying, because you're not wrong. But there's the one sentence that we read. If these people are right, if these people think that they're right, that they're being educated, these educators are putting things into their soul. These images are going into their eyes and giving them quote-unquote knowledge. It's not true knowledge, it's fake. You don't get educated by having stuff put in you. Education is what? What's real education? What does the liberator do? He doesn't come down and put more stuff in their eyes. He doesn't show them things on the screen. He does something. And Hiroka, I know you know this because we talked about it on our walk to the... Turning around.
Turning around.
Yeah, turning around. And particularly you said something very important. Is it just you turn your eyes around? Is it only the eyes that you turn? Well, you can't. Your neck won't turn. What do you have to turn?
Whole body.
Whole body. And since this is an allegory that's not about the body, it's about the self, to be educated, you have to turn your whole self around. Your entire soul has to be reoriented away from the fake world towards the true world. An example. You could have a professor, a world expert, who has assimilated all of the images. He's like an encyclopedia. You ask him a question, he knows the answer. But he doesn't have any education, according to Plato, if he's still looking at the images. By contrast, you could have someone who knows nothing. They're not an encyclopedia at all. They can't answer any questions, but they're turned around. They're getting a real education. We could talk all day again about the cave. I'm going to be careful not to do that because we want to start the dialogue. But now, one last chance. Any other questions about this? Yes, please.
How do you call that turning around whole self in Greek?
In Greek. Metanoia.
Metanoia, that's
Metanoia. And in English, through Latin,
yeah,
conversion.
yeah.
So when you're an atheist and St. Paul comes to you and teaches you about Jesus, that's a conversion. And it means turning, verso, turning with, turning around. Metanoia. In this case, it's noia, nous, that's the mind. And this is good. It's like turning. It's an alteration of your mind. It's not just assimilating images, but turning around. So we talked last time about Zen Buddhism, the crack from the monk on the head with the stick, where you're not getting any information, but you're getting a metanoia. Okay, shall we go to book one? All right. So Yoko, I'm so pleased you're here for so many reasons. One is that you can read the Japanese of the opening page, and after each sentence give a translation. Can you do that? So that they're following, and then I'll comment on each sentence. Yes. Now, if we had 5 years, we would do this for the whole book, for the whole dialogue. We don't have time for that. But we want to do it one time, because I want to give you a sense of how much is going on in every sentence. This is especially true at the opening of any ancient Greek book. The opening paragraph has so much going on that will later be developed. So let's see.
ちょっと一行一行じっくり読んでいって、それぞれの一行の中にどれだけの意味が込められているかっていうのを見ていきたいってことなので、日本語の方を見ながら。So I'm gonna translate it.
Yes, yeah, so read one Japanese sentence and then translate it to English.
Me
Please.
reading Japanese as well.
Why not? Yeah. I mean, they can, how about this? somebody reads a Japanese sentence, and then you translate it into English. Does that sound good? Okay. So-
That's better. Otherwise, they feel that.
I understand. So, yeah, you read the first sentence in Japanese.
一番最第一回の一番最初のところから来るの。はい。
一行ずつ。
一行ずつ本当にもう丸までお願いします。
ソクラテス。昨日僕はアリストンの息子グラウコンと一緒にペイライエウスまで行ってきた。
Yesterday, I went to Peilaeus
Mhm.
with Glaucon, son of Ariston.
Okay. So, Piraeus is Piraeus is the port town of Athens. You're familiar with Athens in Greece? And Athens, now the modern city, is huge. It's not Tokyo, but it's 10 million people, whatever. And you are familiar with the Parthenon, famous temple at the top. That's on a hill called the Acropolis. In Greek, that means city high. This is the high city. Has anyone been to Athens?
Yes.
So, the high city has many, many houses around it, and then this giant temple, which is originally their castle, their fort. And then there are 11 miles from there to the port city. This is called Piraeus. Still today, if you go to the Greek islands, you go to Piraeus and you go on the ship.
今日配ったここに地図があります。
Ah, there's a map?
今のアクロポリスだよね。最低。
Okay, yes. Okay, good. Yes. So that's Piraeus. That's the high city, yes. Okay. Not bad. Not to scale, but okay. So yesterday, Yoko, the translation of that sentence was yesterday. So the entire dialogue is Socrates telling a story. It's going to seem like they're talking, but in fact, it's Socrates saying yesterday, and then the entire dialogue is Socrates telling you what happened yesterday, which is, of course, totally implausible. There's no way he could remember all this. But for whatever reason, Plato's done this. He starts dialogues in strange ways this way. I mean, what might you think if somebody came and said yesterday and then talked for 2 days and told you something that happened yesterday? What would you think about that?
もしこのソクラテこれお話全部ここに書いてあることを一言ソクラテスが話して実際に話してるわけですね。この誰だろうプレマルコスさんがどうたらこうたらみたいないろんな会話が成り立ってること全部この中でソクラテスが話してるんですけれども、このソクラテスがなぜこのような語り方をしているのか、つまり説明的に話すのではなくて。
It means it's not like explanation of the whole thing, summarizing, but the one by one, the conversation itself. Why Socrates is telling as a conversation. Is that what
No, that's not what I'm asking.
So sorry.
It's okay. It seems as if it's a conversation.
Yeah.
And perhaps it was yesterday. So imagine on the weekend I met some people and I had a philosophical conversation that was this long and with all of this detail. And then on Monday morning I come to the class and say, you won't believe what happened to me yesterday. And then blah, 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 I say all of this.
And what is your question?
What would you think about what I was saying?
昨日こういうことがありましたっていうのはこの全部ないでそれを次の日話してるこの全部そんなの不可能じゃないか
What would you think about that?
そのことについてどう思いますかってことです。
It's like you just summarize here, like
Very good.
it's like
Okay.
yesterday's lesson.
Very good. In other words,
Yeah, great.
I probably didn't accurately represent what happened. I put it through my own understanding and I told you. Very good. and following on that, a minor point, would you think I'm getting an accurate representation of the conversation?
I don't.
No. No. So as I say, every Platonic dialogue has some trick like this at the beginning, most of them at any rate. And in this case, I think what he's doing is he's not saying don't believe this, but he's saying take everything with a grain of salt, as we say in English. I'm not sure what the idiom is. Skepticism.
ちょっと何が言われてるかはちょっと疑いながら読んでください。また基本的にサマライズをするっていうまとめる時にはそのいろんな見方が入ってるっていうことで、それが実際に起こったこととイコールとは限らないので、それについてちょっと本当かなっていうふうに思いながら聞いてください。
So over the weekend, I thought about our class, of course, and I thought how pleasant it was and how frustrating it was. Frustrating because I don't know how much is being understood of what I'm saying.
もしかしたらもうちょっともやもやするものを皆さん抱えられたかも、昨日の前回の授業で抱えられるかもしれないですけれども、それはもしかしたら、ここで言われていること、聞いていることについて自分が本当に全て理解できているのかどうかわからないっていうところでちょっともやもやしたかもしれません。
But it's okay, because that's what the dialogue is doing. Socrates is speaking, but not everything is going to get through.
それは当たり前のことで、それソクラテス自身がもうそのような語り方をしている、もうすぐにパシッと分かるような形で話してくれていないからなので心配しなくていいです。
Because it doesn't matter that everything gets through. It doesn't even matter that anything gets through. Only one thing matters. What's the one? Oh, go ahead.
全てのことが分からなくてもよくて、分かってほしいのはたった一つのことです。
And what's the one thing that matters?
それは何でしょうか。
If I'm an educator, if Socrates is an educator, what's the only thing that matters? Is it that I have 100 pieces of information and I'm going to put them into your brain? Is that what matters? Do I succeed if 98 get in there? Or 76? No. What is the only thing I have to do as an educator in order to succeed?
教育者としての先生が 100% 先生誰だっていうふうになるときには一体何ができていたらいいでしょうか。ただただ自分の持っている全ての情報を皆さんの頭の中に詰め込んだらいいというわけではないですよね。じゃあその一つのことっていうのは何でしょうか。
Like click the people in front of you on, like,
Yes.
okay, I want to know this, I want to know
Okay.
this, I want to understand this.
Okay.
I want to understand. Like,
Yes.
it's like, what I want to say is that, like, click you on.
Click you on.
Yeah.
I'll be very happy if I do that. But Plato thinks you can put it more precisely, and that would be actual education. It's not about feeling clicked on, although that's great, and if I can do that, I'm happy. But someone here, oh, it's gone, someone in the cave could feel clicked on and really want to know about the images. Oh, I'm going to go and I'm going to read this, and I'm going to learn the Greek. I'm going to do my PhD in Plato studies. I'm clicked on. But nothing has actually happened for real education. What would I need to do if I really succeed?
Question?
That would be the start, but it has to be more than that. Because go to the cave. The prisoners, if they start questioning the images, that's a very good start. But what has to happen next? If it doesn't happen, it was for nothing.
興味を持つ、疑問を持つとかいう以上に一つだけ教師がしたい、しなければいけない。
Think about the cave. It's gone. The prisoners are looking. If they start questioning, that's a good start. If they start saying, I don't think this is real, that's a good start. But the next thing that happens, Plato thinks, and I think he's right, people get confused and upset, and then they just turn back. They just start believing again. What is the one thing that's necessary? Turning around. That's the only thing that matters. So it's okay. I felt over the weekend, it's okay if a lot is not getting through. I'm in America, 100% is getting through, but I rarely feel that anything is really happening. There's not much correspondence between the amount of information I can convey and the power of education. They're two different things.
どれだけの情報を与えるか、皆さんにお話しするかということと、実際に何かが得られるかということではまたすごい差があると、実際の教育の実践上では。
So you don't know what's going to happen, right?
No.
From now.
No. You probably never do.
Mm.
But I mentioned last time, I've had students that hated my class, that failed and hated it, and then 10 years later say thank you. Something happened to them then, and it took a while for them to realize. In America, we have this terrible system where at the end of the semester, the students fill out an evaluation of the professor. Do you have that here?
Scary.
And then my salary and my promotions are all based on that. Now think about Plato's cave. Necessary to education is turning people around. Do they enjoy being turned around? Remember we talked about that last time? First they feel confused. Then what do they feel? If somebody is turning them.
Angry.
Angry. So if real education is happening, the students will get angry. And then they fill out the evaluation. Oh, worst professor ever. And then 10 years later, thank you, that was the only class that ever mattered. Well, it's too late. I've already been fired. Okay. So yesterday, Glaucon and I went down to the Piraeus. So Socrates and Glaucon. Exactly. These two guys went down to the Piraeus. There's a political background here that you'll need to know later. So this dialogue becomes about politics very intensely for 2 whole books. And we should know something before, well, when we get there, it'll help us. So there was a civil war in Athens. There was a war with Sparta called the Peloponnesian War.
スパルタとの間で、アテナとスパルタの間で戦争があった。
ペロポネソス戦争を中心。
Okay? And during that war with Sparta, there was a civil war within Athens. As often happens in foreign wars, if a country is fighting against another country, some people in the country don't want to fight the war, and some people want to fight it, and then they start fighting each other. And in Athens, the factions were the Democrats and the aristocrats. In Greek, kratos means power. Demos means people. People power, the power of everybody, versus the power of the best.
That is what the Civil War.
So that is what the words mean, and that is what the Civil War was. The established people of the city who had the money, and thus the time for education and training in war and so on, they were the aristocrats. They lived up here, for the most part. The people who wanted everyone to have a say, they generally lived down here. There's a reason for that. This is where the Navy was. And there was, of course, an army, and there was a navy. In ancient Greece, at this time, if you were in the army, you had to pay for your own armor. You had to be rich. And you had to have time to train, like a samurai. A very special type of person. Only the rich could do this. And because they fought, they ruled, because they were the strongest. So these cities had been aristocracies for a long time. But Athens gained a naval empire. So this isn't going to be to scale. These are islands. The ships went back and forth and they controlled this. This is terrible. Let's see. Okay, so Turkey, Greece. It wasn't Turkey in antiquity. This was Greece. But when I say Greece, it wasn't a nation. It was a bunch of Greek cities. A bunch of Greek cities. And then there are the islands. That's what I was trying to do here. Athens is right here, one city. Sparta is right here, one city. But they were close in power. Sparta had the best army. For 700 years, they were never conquered, with no walls. They said, we don't need walls. Our armor is our wall. So Sparta controlled this territory and this territory. Athens controlled all of this with its ships. But there's a big difference between the people who are in the army, those are the samurai, and the people in the navy. Anyone can pull an oar. You don't need special training. You don't need special equipment. If you're poor, you can be in the Navy. To be in the Army, you have to be rich. Do you want to explain that?
You're talking about the Athens, right? Not
Athens.
Sparta. アテネの中では、いわばお金持ちの人たちが住む山間部と貧しい人たちが住む海側があって、で、やっぱり陸軍に入るためにはその自分たちの鎧とか全てを自分たちで用意しなければいけなかったので、すごくお金がかかるということで、陸軍の方に入ることができる。けれどもお金のない人たちは海軍の方に入って、そこで特に何か必要なものがないのでできるということで、この2つの So you're saying that there is a war in between those
Yes.
この2つの側ですね、お金持ち側とあとちょっと普通の庶民の側との間で内戦が当時スパルタとの間でアテナとスパルタの間で戦いがあると同時にアテナの中でも内戦が起こっているという状況でした。
Okay. I realize we should talk dates. So, 432 BC, Peloponnesian War. It lasts until 401. 399, Socrates executed. Civil War, 401. This dialogue, we don't know, but somewhere in here. So this dialogue is during the Peloponnesian War, but before the Civil War. And the reason why that's important is these differences exist during this dialogue, but they haven't yet come to shedding blood.
この会話が行われたのはちょうど、この2つの陸側と、山間側と海側との人たちとの間で、分裂はあったんだけども、まだそこまでの戦いは起こっていなくって、でも現状としては何か違いがあるというところの、実際の内戦が起こるちょっと間際ぐらいにこの会話がなされていたということです。それで年代書いていただきます。
Okay. Okay, so Socrates and Glaucon are from here. They're aristocrats. Glaucon's dad is Ariston, the best man. He has a brother who will appear in book 2. I think he's a minor character in book 1. And Ariston has a third son who doesn't appear in this dialogue, but you've heard of him before, Plato. So Ariston, the dad, has 3 sons, Glaucon, Adimantus, and Plato.
中で出てくる本の中で、アリストンっていうのがこのお父さんなんです。その中でグラウコンとデマウスとそれからプラトンという3人の息子がいて、この人たちがいわば貴族社会の中でも特に力のある人たちだった。
Okay. Another sentence.
It is to pray for the goddess.
Okay.
One thing is to pray for the goddess, and the other is that we wanted to go to see how the festival is taking place because it was the first time.
Okay. So Socrates, who is probably 65 years old, has walked 11 miles in the hot sun, and he's going to walk 11 miles back, 22 miles. You might think, wow, 22-mile walk for a 65-year-old man, that's must be important. What's he going to do? He's going to see a festival. He's curious. He's heard that they've done this amazing festival.
このお父さん、かなりお年のアリストンさんは、祭りを見るために22マイル、往復22マイル歩いて、わざわざ行って戻ってくるってことだったけれども、そのお祭りにはだからそれだけ意味があったということなんですけれども。
Yes. And so, Sonia, I was thinking of, well, when you said something last class, I was thinking of this, but we weren't there yet. What do you think he's driven by? Remember, the soul is desire. We'll get to that on Thursday. But there are different kinds of desires. What's he driven by? Socrates. A 65-year-old man who'd do a 22-mile journey.
So you're talking about Socrates?
Socrates.
ごめんなさい、今のアリストじゃなくてソクラテスですね。すみません、ごめんなさい、間違えました。ソクラテスがわざわざhe was 65.
Roughly. We don't, I mean, it's in here
I thought you were
somewhere.
talking about Ariston, so.
Oh, no, Aristotle.
ごめんなさい、今アリストンのことじゃなくて、ソクラテスのこと65歳のソクラテスがわざわざ11マイルかけてお祭りまで行ってまた帰ってきてっていう、往復のすごい大切なことをしたのは、一体それだけのお祭りに行くためのどんなモチベーションがあったんでしょうかっていう質問でした。
So you don't have to answer, anybody can answer, and you. Why do you think he's doing this?
何だと思いますか、そのわざわざそのお祭りに出かけてきたのは。
If I go to the grocery store, it's because I'm hungry. If I haven't had a meal in a week, I'm going to walk 22 miles to get to the grocery store. So if I asked you, what am I driven by? Hunger. Socrates is going 22 miles because he's hungry for something. What does he want? What's he driven by?
Want to turn people around?
No. No. Just, it's in the sentence.
この文章の中に入ってる。
He does, but that comes later, so you're not wrong. In this sentence, what does he want?
Eros? Or
Well, Eros is desire, and I'm asking, what's his desire for? Why did he go to Piraeus?
Concrete.
Yeah, yeah.
ちょっと具体的に言ったらなんででしょう。
He didn't go to the grocery store. He went to
スーパーマーケットに八重さんに行ったんじゃなくて何に行ったんでしょう。
You could just read the sentence again. It's just right there.
ちょうど2行目ですよね。女神にお祈りを捧げるためであったがの文章の中に書いてあります。
What's he going for? You think I'm asking something deeper
か
than
な
I...
り単純な質問です。この文章の中から何が書いてあるか、何で言ったとか。すいません。
いやいや初めて
The first time he wanted to see.
To see, he wants to see something.
See that something. それ
What's the thing?
何を見たか。
行列トラケア人
今の2行目の文章の中だけで多分答えてもらってあります。この 女神にお祈りを捧げるためだったが、ダララララ気持ちもあったまで。We forgot to read this sentence in Japanese.
Oh, okay.
はい。
どう
で、まあ、何のためか。
何の
It's like why?
Yeah. But I'm not asking a deep question. This is taking much longer. I'll just say it. He's going to see, he's not going to eat, he's not going to touch, he's going to see a festival.
祭りを見るなんですよね。その言葉が欲しか
A
った。
festival of what?
何のお祭りなんでしょう。
Of a new goddess.
新しい女神様のためのお祭りだったんですよね。
My map. My map. Okay. Athens is here. Here is Thrace. There's a goddess, Bendis. The Athenians have Athena, Zeus, Aphrodite, so on. The Thracians have Bendis, goddess, a particular goddess. Socrates has never seen her before. He's never seen her festival, he's never seen her. It would be like when the Portuguese arrived in Japan and started talking about Jesus. Who are you talking about? Who's this Jesus guy? Socrates would be the guy who would go down to the port. Tell me about Jesus. I want to hear about Jesus. I'm curious. He would walk 22 miles to hear about Jesus. Because he's walked 22 miles to hear about Bendis. He's got eros, or desire for God. And he knows that God appears in many places in many ways. And he wants to see the various facets of God. That's what he's driven by. Now you're absolutely right. You'll see in the next few sentences, he wants to turn people around. But remember the liberator from the cave, in order to turn people around, what does he have to do first? Because he's born just like us at the bottom of the cave. In order to turn people around, what does he have to do first? Well, even before that, he's a baby. Looking at the images, he grows up. You're right, eventually he has to come into the cave, but before he comes into the cave, he has to turn around and go out of the cave. And what is he going to go out to see in the story?
It's a tree.
A tree.
And sunlight.
The sun.
Yeah.
And what does the sun represent?
Like God.
God. So Socrates is driven to see God. He's driven to come out of the cave. But life isn't so simple where we go out, we get our goal, we come back. We go out a bit, we come back a bit and help somebody go out a bit too. We go out a bit more, we turn around, we help somebody go out a bit more. So that's why you had the other half of the answer of the question I asked. My question was, what's he driven by? His answer right there is, I'm driven by curiosity about God. But you'll see in the next few sentences, and I heard that there was going to be some conversation with some young men. Okay? How about we read another sentence? Oh, yes. So you read one. Can you read the next sentence? Oh, in Chinese. Okay. Let's do just Japanese. It's already enough, I think.
次の、お祭りの行列は、町の人たちがなかなか見事だと思ったが、しかしそれに劣らず、ひときわ見栄えがしたのはトラキア人たちが行った行列だった。The procession of the festival.
Yes.
The one of the people in town
Yes.
were wonderful,
Yes.
but the one that was done by the Thracians was the
That's Thracians. Yeah.
Asian.
Thracians.
Turkey. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Another sentence? Is that the end of that?
That was one sentence.
Okay.
Sure, we're done.
She can read another.
もう一文お願いします。
お参りも済ませたし、見物も終わったので、 アテナイに向かって引き上げ始めた。
We went back to Athene after the praying and looking around.
Okay, so Socrates and Glaucon come down, they see the festival of Bendis, and they think it's beautiful, and now it's time to go home. This is going to be at night, after a long day, 11 miles, standing, watching a festival. Time to go home. What happens next? Can you read?
お参りも済ませたし、見物も終わったので、僕たちがこれ読んだ。ですると、ケパロスの息子、ポレマルクスが、家路を急ぎ始めた僕たちの姿を遠くから見つけて、召使いの子供に走っていって、自分を待つようにお願いしなさいと言いつけた。
So then the Polemarchus,
Okay, so,
the son of Keparos,
okay, just a moment. So, Cephalus is the dad. Okay. Polemarchus.
found we are going back.
Yes. So Socrates and Glaucon are walking home. Polemarchus lives with his father here in the Piraeus. This is a democratic family. This is an aristocratic family. Polemarchus, as he sees Socrates and Glaucon going up, Polemarchus comes from behind, and what happens?
Asked the child of the servant to go and ask the Socrates to wait for him.
Yes. Does it say child of the servant?
That's the exact translation.
Wow. Okay, so that's a mistake. In Greek, there's a word, pais, from which paidos. In English characters, that would be paidos. We have in English pediatrician. That's a doctor of children. Pediatrician. This is child. So there's a child. But this word means two things, child or servant. We would say in English, slave. So in slave societies, such as America 200 years ago, masters would call the slaves children. They would say, hey boy, come here. They're thought of as childlike human beings, immature. So the Greek is pais. Polemarchus gets a pais, and he says, hey pais, go get Socrates. Could be a kid, probably a slave.
まあ、召使いって書いてます。これ違うんですか？
召使いの子供や。
Yeah, it's like,
まあ両方意味を。
it's like there's a word for son,
Yes.
that which means like the son of Keparos.
Yeah.
That's exactly correct. And also there's a sentence like which illustrates about the slave as well.
Okay.
Like the servant. So a bit correct.
But we don't have to worry about the Japanese. It's the Greek that matters. Just like we don't have to worry about the English.
これ、
スレイブチャイルド、日本語やったら召使いの子供やから、スレイブの子供になってるから、まあ両方の意味を取ってるよね。
Okay. So Polemarchus has a slave. I'll make him look like a boy. And he says, hey slave, go get Socrates. Then what happens?
the child comes and
Grabs.
the bottom of his
Yes.
my jacket.
Yes.
And
So, if I may, in a slave society, there are masters who have dignity, and then there are slaves who have less dignity. If somebody who's a slave goes up and grabs a master's cloak, this is very offensive. If this were Glaucon or Adimantus, he would slap the slave. He grabs Socrates. What does Socrates do?
Before that, Charles says something.
Oh, what does he say?
Should I continue?
Yeah, go ahead and read what he said.
They
Oh.
read it or?
Oh, you can read it in a sense.
これマルコスがあなた方にお待ちになってくださいと言っています。This is what the slave child says.
Yes,
Fray Marcos says that please wait for us.
yes, yes. So, fair enough, polite thing to say, but after grabbing you in the cloak, if you're a master, you're upset. Socrates is not upset at all. What does he say?
And I turned back and asked the child, where is your master?
Yeah, so just very polite, namely, okay, where is he? I assume the next sentence is he's catching up.
Yeah, well, the child says that there.
There, points to him.
Points.
Okay, okay.
And they are coming towards here, so please wait.
Okay,
And Brother says, okay, we'll wait.
okay. Okay, so Tadashi, will you read a sentence in Japanese? Afterwards, yeah.
ほどなくしてから。
ほどなくして
はい。
プレマルコスがやってきた。グラウコンの兄アディマントス、ニキシスの息子ニケロトス、ニケラトス、その他何人かの者も一緒で、みんなお祭りの行列を見物した帰りと見えた。
Then Primalcos came.
Yes.
The Arimantus.
That's Adimantus, the brother of Glaucon,
the
brother of Plato, son of Ariston.
And Niceratus.
Okay, so a bunch of other people, yes. Niceratus, okay.
And the other
Yeah,
people as well
I won't write their names. Lots of other people.
came,
Mhm.
and they all seem to come back from the festival.
Okay, so there's a huge crowd. And they're meeting Glaucon and Socrates who are on the way home. And now it gets interesting. So, one more sentence.
プレマルコスが言った。ソクラテス、お見受けしたところ、どうやらあなた方はここを引き上げるおつもりで、都の方へ向かい始めたようですね。そう、お察しの通り、僕は答える。
Primalcos says, Socrates, it looks like you're going, finishing watching the festival
Yeah.
and going back to the depot, to the city.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I answered, yes, that's
Okay.
what they're doing.
Okay, one more.
ワンも
Yeah. Now it'll get
そう
interesting.
ねえねえねえどうだ我々がここに総勢何人控えているのかあなたの目に入っているのですかと彼が言った。
He says that how many people we are.
Yes.
Do you know? Do you actually see how many people we are?
Okay, that's weird. First of all, it's a joke, so it's not as bad as it sounds, but it's a joke with an edge. Polemarchus is part of a big crowd. This is just two men. These are the few. These are the many. Remember, democracy is the rule of the many. Aristocracy is the rule of the few best men, the rich, the samurai, and so on. These many, Polemarchus says, don't you see how many we are? If I want you to do something, if I say, let's say we're going out to lunch, and you want to go to one restaurant, and everybody else wants to go to another restaurant, or how about you two want to go to restaurant A, and the rest of us want to go to restaurant B, and I say, don't you see how many we are? Now, if you're Democrats, you'll think, oh, we'll go with the majority. But if you're aristocrats, you don't go with the majority, you go with what's best. So you might say, we're still going to the restaurant A because it's better. Don't you see how many we are? It's an intimidation. It's the force of the masses against the few. Now they're friends, it's just a joke. You can joke in here. This is not a joke. This is when the joke becomes real. Polemarchus has two brothers, Lysias, a famous Greek orator, who's mentioned in this account, but he doesn't speak. And Euthydemus. When the Civil War happens, this family fights for the democracy. They die. I can't remember who dies here. But this joke eventually becomes real. What does Socrates say next? Maybe, Hiroka, you can read a couple Japanese sentences?
無論それならあなた方はと彼は言った。ここにいる我々よりも強くなるか、それができなければここにとどまるか、二つに一つですよ。
Of course, that he says first.
Yes.
And then you
Yes.
have to be stronger than we are,
Yes.
or otherwise you have to stay here. You have to choose one out of two choices.
Okay. And what's next?
もう一つの道が残されていはしないかね、と僕は答えた。つまり、我々を放免すべきだということを君たちに説得すればよいわけだろう。
There should be one other way left.
There's another way besides force. Before you read, what's the other way? If you two want to go to restaurant A, you want to have Italian, and we want to have Chinese. We're more than you. You can either just submit to the force, or what else can you do?
Conversation, discussion.
Yes, you can say, this is a really good Italian restaurant, and that's a bad Chinese restaurant. So even though Chinese food is fine, and Italian food is fine, let's go to a good restaurant. Let's use reason to find what's good, rather than resolve everything with power and force. So we have this contrast right at the beginning between force and persuasion.
この物語の中でもうすでに力ずくでそれともちゃんと説得して話し合ってディスカッションして決めていくのかっていうことの、が現れているっていうのが、そこの特にこの、時系列でいうとちょうど実際のここの間の戦争が起こるちょっと前に起こっている出来事ということで、私の感想です。面白いのかなっていう。はい。
Okay. Yoshi, can you give us a couple Japanese sentences?
その説得の言葉をと彼は、我々の方が全然聞こうとしなかったらそれでも説得できますか、それはできないよとブラウコンが言った。
Remarcus says that very word of persuasion, if we don't listen to it, is it still possible to persuade? And Dragon says it's impossible.
Yes. So persuasion, words. Won't listen. Will listen. If somebody won't listen, persuasion won't work. So you can force somebody, or you can persuade them. But there's no point in persuading somebody if they won't listen. Somebody has to listen to be persuaded. Now that's obvious, but you've had the experience of trying to persuade somebody and they're listening, but you get the feeling like it doesn't matter what I say, they will never change their mind. That's what he means by listening. Having an open mind such that you might actually change your mind. This is a big problem in philosophy because we don't force each other, we persuade each other. But in most of our discussions, people won't listen. Of course, their ears are open, they nod, they say words, and so on. But nothing that you say will ever change their mind, and vice versa. Occasionally, you have a conversation where the people are really listening. So, I'll just give an English word for this. We'll just call this conversation. Where somebody will listen, versus, say, debate. Where the person's not going to listen, they're just going to use words to refute you, to show that you're wrong.
この説得の中にもカンバセーション、会話っていうものと、それからディベートっていう形の両方があって、こちらの方はその聞く耳があるというのか、説得される可能性が強い。に対してディベートの方はもう基本的にはもう聞かないということは。
Okay. I'm just going to look ahead, although we talked about this a bit. Socrates values this. This is what he tries to do. When he's having a discussion with these people in Book 1, a dialogue, at least in his mind, it's this. He's listening, he wants them to listen. And this is going to be called, well, the word in Greek is dialectic, which in Greek just means conversation. Yeah. This, in Greek, is called eristic, from the Greek eris, which means strife, fighting, contest, like a debate. There were specialists at this time, experts in debating. Do you remember what they were called? I mentioned them only once last time, so it's okay.
今このディベートにすごい長けてる人の話をしたと、昨日じゃない、前回かしたと思うんですけど、その方の名前覚えてますか？
It's okay. Plato's going to call this person the philosopher, and this person the sophist. Do you see the words soph and soph? That means wisdom.
英知という意味の言葉が両方に入っています。
This is someone who loves wisdom, and because he loves wisdom, he's willing to walk 22 miles to have a conversation, to learn. He doesn't have it, but he wants it. He's driven by desire for it. This is somebody who thinks he already has it. There's no love of wisdom. There's just, I'm wise. So he's not going to walk 22 miles for a conversation unless there's something else he gets from the conversation. If he gets paid, if people clap and he becomes famous, or if he can use that conversation to get power. So the sophists are experts in speaking, and their goals are getting money, getting fame, getting power by using words. And they can do it themselves. They can make political speeches and win elections, or they can write speeches for other people and get paid, or they can teach someone how to do this and get paid. And then if they're good enough at this and enough people come and buy their services, they become famous. So I mentioned last time someone named Protagoras. He's a sophist. He's the one who said, man is the measure of all things. What did that mean? Again, I'm not testing you. I just want to see what got through. When I talked about man is the measure of all things, the saying of Protagoras, what does that mean?
前回出た言葉ですね。
Like, here's the answer, you know. Like, the guy in front of you has the answer. That's it. If that makes
I
sense.
think you're on the right track. Let me draw a contrast.
Yeah, don't have to have discussion anymore, you know.
Let's draw a contrast. What is the answer to that? 4. Really? Or you just think so? Oh, you don't think that the real answer is 4?
I was told I'm supposed to answer that 4. Yeah.
Okay. So, at least in the role that you're playing now, you agree with Protagoras that there's no real answer. There's only what you've been told. And you learned what you were told, and you're going to say again what you were told, and so on. But it's all just people talking, and if people believe that, well, that's what it is. That's the position that man is the measure of all things. We call it in English the doctrine of relativism. That the truth is relative to what people think. So if people think 2 + 2 = 5, then 2 + 2 = 5. If people think 2 + 2 = 5 in China, it's 5 in China. If people think 2 + 2 = 3 in America, it's 3 in America. But there's no answer to that question outside of what people think. That's the position of Protagoras. That's characteristic of sophists, because if there's no real answer, then their craft, their expertise of persuading people is the ultimate craft. If I'm really good at speaking, I could convince you that that equals anything I want to convince you of. But if there's a real answer, I'm going to be useless for finding the real answer. I'm just good at manipulating people's minds to get them to believe things. Who's the person who tells you what the real answer to that is? I'll make it a little bit harder. 2 squared plus 2 squared equals, you don't have to do it, but who's the person who knows that immediately? Because it's her expertise. What's the name for that person? That craft, that expertise.
そういうことができる人に対してどのような名前をつけるんでしょうか。
I'm going to make it hard. 2 to the power of root 2, 2 to the power of root 2. I don't even know what that is, but if I wander Doshisha, I'll find somebody who can do that. What's that person called?
あれを解けるような人だと、なんと。
Maybe I made it too hard. There's the Department of Education and Culture. Then there's the Department of English Literature, the Department of Psychology. I'm not going to find in those departments anyone who can do this, most likely. But there is a department, I hope, at Doshisha where there'll be 10 people who can do that. And they'll know it. What's that called? Experts in what? Not experts in psychology, not experts in education and culture, not experts in English literature, but experts in mathematics. So we have a craft, expertise in mathematics, which gives you the real answer. But then we also have a craft or expertise that assumes there is no real answer. What is its expertise? Not finding the real answer, but persuading people of what the answer, quote unquote, is. Imagine I'm an accountant or a stockbroker, and I'm going to make a lot of money if I can get people to believe that the answer to this is 6. That's not the real answer. But if I have this expertise, I can talk, fancy talk, and get you to believe this, and then when we do the accounting books, you're going to put 6, and I'm going to get rich. Or in America, we have elections, and there's a lot of debate about how to count the votes. If I can persuade you how to count the votes in the way that makes me the winner, assuming there's no real answer, I can use this craft to get powerful. So do you see back to where we started? Persuasion, 2 types. If someone will listen, you can find out the truth. If someone isn't interested in finding out the truth, and they won't listen, you can trick them. Something else that we call this in English is rhetoric. These are Greek words. The art of speaking, the art of debating, the art of conversing. When I say art, I said craft, expertise, art. Those are 3 English translations of one Greek word. Sorry, this is getting really messy. techne, from which we get in English technical, technology, technique, etc., etc., etc. This word can mean craft, expertise, science, art. It's a body of skill for a purpose. And this dialogue, remember I said the cave, it's about education, two types of education, real and fake. Real, we're going to call philosophy now, tries to find out what things really are. Who are you really? What is justice really? Fake education is the cave wall, the images. What do people think justice is? What do people think they are? How can I play a puppet show to make people think they are consumers? I don't know what the word is in Japanese, consumer.
消費者
If I'm a powerful person, I have a TV show and I speak and I make it funny, and the message of that show is you're a consumer. Why would I do that? How would it benefit me to have you be a consumer? Make money. Especially if I can make an advertisement to make you consume my product. So fake education ultimately comes down to manipulation of images and appearances for the purpose of making money, becoming famous, becoming powerful. We'll talk about why those go together eventually. Versus real education, which is trying to find out what things really are. It might cost you money, it might cost you fame, it might cost you power, it might cost you your life, as it did for Socrates. Because people get angry when you turn them around.
So they're, let's say, mathematician or technician. They're all experts in one specific.
Exactly.
Yeah, but but you didn't say that they're all reached the one singular idea already. You didn't mention that, right? So they're all experts in that knowledge, or but they not reaching that like a best point or like singular idea yet.
Well, let's jumping ahead a bit. We're going to talk about crafts, or I'll call them techni, here, but we can do it now since you're asking. Let's just think about them. Carpentry is a craft. What's it in Japanese? Carpentry.
Carpenter.
Carpenter.
Yeah.
You work with wood. You know things that the mathematician doesn't know. You know types of wood, how to cut it, how to put it together, to make a chair, to make a house. That's an expertise. Horsemanship. You know about horses, you know how to ride a horse, you know when's the right time to whip it, how to steer it, how to groom it. Sailing. You know how to work a boat, you know the wind, you know the waves, and so on. These are all different techni. Each has its own purpose with its own set of skills and knowledge. So that's the notion that we're going to do a lot of work with. What was your question in particular? I didn't get it.
So these every single experts are all experts in like sailing or
That's right.
horsemanship or whatever.
Yes.
But
not one idea. Sorry.
yes, but do they already reach one singular idea or like I don't know, son of gods?
Oh, no, they don't. No, I mean
they're on the way.
Carpenter knows how to make a table. He doesn't. I mean, he might know about God, but not as a carpenter. Horsemanship. Horse trainer knows about horses, and he might know about God, but not as a horse trainer. Doctors know about how to make you healthy, etc. Sophists know how to change your mind, even when you won't listen. And why are they doing that? They're doing it because they find that's the best way to get money and power and fame. These are all different techni or expertise.
Because I don't know, I'm right now realistically thinking about like today's situation, you know. I guess that's what we talked on last week, yeah, or lunch, yeah. Let's say medicine, yeah, that's what we talked, yeah, last week. You know, doctor in the hospital, but we all like believing their professional kind of tactics or
Yes.
tact or
Yes.
whatever.
Yes.
Also, our mathematics teacher in our high school as well. We're believing our, you know, I don't
Yes.
know, trust in them, yeah, and relying on their techniques like,
Yes.
that they have.
Yes.
But yeah, so recently I feel like the professional kind of techniques like such as medicine or scientists or pedagogists, or whatever,
Yes.
these are all, you know, getting blurred. I was thinking about that.
Yes.
So
Yes.
kind of getting confused about like with, you know, those situations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me respond. I think we're in harmony here, but you can come back if I'm not. I'll speak about America for the moment. There's a crisis in America of expertise. And what I mean by that is most Americans, or many of them, look to the elite class that's supposed to contain the experts, the doctors. Let's just take the doctors for a moment. I mean, but you could say the professors, the lawyers, the accountants. The doctors are supposed to know the truth and what's real about the human body and so on. Well, we just went through this, as you did, a couple of years of COVID. And it seems like they didn't really know what they were doing. That's just an example of where people who are good at carpentry, and they really know carpentry, or they're good auto mechanics, they're really good. They know it. There's no, as we say in America, no bullshit. They look at those experts and think, you don't really know what you're talking about. You went to school, you got your degree, you say the things that you were taught to say in school, but when there's a real crisis like a new disease, you're helpless. And you make stuff up. And one can look at that and think, along with the relativists, there's no answer. Your expertise is just your way to get money and power and fame, and you've convinced other people that that's true. But it's not true. It's true. The sophists are the people, I wish I had my cave, they're the people, their education is to turn you around and point you to the puppeteers. They don't think there's anything outside the cave. They point you to the puppeteers and say, that's the best life, being a puppeteer. Because then you're not being tricked by anybody. You're doing the tricking. And that's what education is about, learning how to trick people. And the sophists, of which we have a very powerful one here, we'll get to him after our break. I lost my train of thought. Oh, yes. But they think, when they look at Socrates, you'll see his attitude to Socrates. He looks at Socrates and he thinks, you're just a trickster just like me. But the ingenuity of your trick is you say there's this thing called the truth. That's your way of tricking people into thinking that you're an expert. But there is no truth. You're just really good at tricking people into thinking that there is. Whereas I, Thrasymachus, I'm being honest. I'm here just for money. I gave you a great definition of justice. Aren't you going to pay me now? You read it? You'll read it again. We'll talk about it after our break. But it's just full of his arrogance, first of all, and then his demand to be paid, his wish that people will clap when he's done talking, his talking about tyrants and crime as the way to be the best educated.
Yeah. So I feel like the author here is kind of positing like technicians or every single technician here in this context, in this book, like posits it like they all know about the truth about the expertise, you know.
Yeah. Carpenters know about wood,
Yeah.
auto mechanics.
Yeah.
The thing is, most people, even relativists, will grant, yeah, auto mechanics, they know about cars. I'm impressed. Every time I take my car in, he fixes it. I mean, it's an amazing, the machine, it's just got 1 million parts, and within 3 hours, he's found the problem and he's fixed it. I've been in academia for 30 years. I take a problem to a conference and there's never any solution. There's just 100 disagreements about it, and many of the people are faking it. There's no faking being an auto mechanic. I mean, you can fake it for a month, but once your cars don't get fixed, people don't go to you anymore. So I love going to my auto mechanic because I feel like I'm in contact with some real knowledge.
Yeah.
And then the question is, okay, there's real knowledge about cars, there's real knowledge about wood, there's real knowledge about horses, there's real knowledge about sailboats. What about justice? Is there real knowledge about justice? Socrates thinks so. He wants to have a conversation or a dialectic about it. That's what this is. That's what we'll talk about after our break. Socrates having what he thinks is a real conversation about a real thing to find out what it is. Thrasymachus thinks there is no real thing. This is fake. What's really going on here, Socrates, is you're a showman. You're doing this so that people will clap for you instead of clapping for me. So when you said there's no one idea that all the crafts, Socrates thinks there is one super craft. There's the craft of wood, the craft of cars, etc., but then there's one super craft, the craft of crafts, philosophy. Thrasymachus also thinks there's a craft of crafts, sophistry, debate. Those are the two models of education. There's education in wood, education in cars, that's called technical education. But then higher education, there's just two types, philosophy and sophistry, according to this time. Shall we break there? Okay, so 15 minutes. Real 15 minutes, Japanese 15 minutes. See, last time, in America we want 15 minutes breaks, but if you say 15 minutes, people will come back 20 minutes later. So I always say 10-minute break, and then it's a 15 minutes. So I said that last time, and everyone came back at 10 minutes. So the first half, we have two families, the family of Cephalus, the family of Ariston, and two educators, Socrates and Thrasymachus. Now, Glaucon and Adimantus are present. Plato is not present as a character. He's the author, of course. They're all present, but only he speaks, and they don't speak, or at least don't have important parts. He speaks a little bit. These are the main characters: Cephalus, Polemarchus, Thrasymachus, Glaucon, and Socrates. So in Book 1, we have the opening scene, which we've spent today describing. And then what it becomes is a conversation, a dialectic with three people. Between Socrates, he's always interrogating Cephalus, interrogating Polemarchus, interrogating Thrasymachus. Okay? So now we'll talk about the details of those interrogations. Cephalus is invited to speak. So we didn't finish the dramatic detail, but Polemarchus persuades Socrates to come down to his house, the house of Cephalus, and have dinner. And that's when Polemarchus says, "Oh, Socrates, you should come because there are going to be some young men and we can have a conversation." And Socrates says, "Okay, definitely, I'll come then." So he returns. So Socrates goes to the house, and Thrasymachus is already there at the party. Glaucon goes with him, Adimantus is already there. And Cephalus says, he's a very old man. He says, "Socrates, I'm so glad that you've come down to talk to us because I love conversations, but I don't get to the city very often. So you're going to have to come here. I can't go there." And Socrates says, well, I'm really glad to speak to you, Cephalus, because you're an old man. You must have wisdom, the wisdom of experience. So tell us what you have learned in your long life. And initially the conversation is about bodily pleasures. Someone says, surely in old age, life is not as good as it is in young age because you can't enjoy things as much. You can't enjoy food and sex and so on. And Cephalus says, first of all, it's actually a relief not to have so much pleasure in those things. It frees the mind. And then he also says that even young people who are absorbed in those things and enjoying those things can't really enjoy them unless they have an ordered soul. He doesn't say soul, but that's what he has in mind. If somebody is eating, having sex, going to a party, cheering, they're drawn from one thing to the next and they're not ordered and calm, and they're not really enjoying themselves. They're like addicts. And he says, if you're young, you can't really enjoy yourself unless you're ordered. And when you're old, if you're ordered, you're more or less enjoying yourself as much as you can anyway. And in fact, he thinks it's easier to be ordered in your old age than it is into your young age. So he's effectively saying it's better to be old than to be young, because what's valuable in life is being ordered, and that's easier when you're old than when you're young. And then Socrates says, you know, you're a wealthy man, Cephalus. And I should have said, he's very wealthy. He owns a factory. Factories before the 19th century, had slaves. So he has many slaves, and he's an arms manufacturer. They make shields for the war. So he got very rich off the war. And Socrates says, well, you say the secret to life is being ordered, but most people would say you're happy because you're wealthy. And he says, well, they're wrong. Because although it is nice to be wealthy, the advantage of being wealthy is it helps you be ordered. Because if you're poor, then there are many more temptations to steal, for example. Whereas when you're wealthy, you have no temptation to steal, and so you can remain ordered. He says, it's easy to be distracted by the wealth and not to recognize what's really valuable. And then he says the important thing next. He says, the really nice thing about having an ordered soul is, and wealth too, is that you don't commit injustice. So effectively he's saying, I should say, justice. So order and justice are the same thing. Effectively he's saying, when he's asked, tell us about your life, tell us what you've learned, he's effectively saying, I've learned that the best life is the just life. And wealth is nice because it helps you be just, but it's not valuable for its own sake. And there's nothing wrong with bodily pleasures so long as they don't take away from your justice and your order. That then focuses Socrates' mind on justice, which remains the subject for all of Book 1 and all of the dialogue until Book 10. Many other topics will arise, but it will always be ultimately about this question. So what is justice? Socrates doesn't ask him, what is justice? He says, based on what you're saying, you seem to imply that justice equals telling the truth and repaying your debts. That's because he had said, I am glad I'm wealthy because then I'm not tempted to lie and then I'm not tempted to steal, which would be unjust. So he's not defining justice, but Socrates is extracting from what he's saying a definition of justice. It's telling the truth and repaying your debts. Then Socrates makes an objection. So that's the definition. Then Socrates makes an objection. I'll get to that in a moment, but I just want you to see that the first book has the same structure throughout every single one. Cephalus gives a definition, Socrates makes an objection. Polemachus gives a definition, Socrates makes some objections. Thrasymachus gives a definition, Socrates makes some objections. It gets more and more complicated But it's the same model. It's the model that I mentioned earlier, dialectic, which again is just Greek for conversation in English. But dialectic is aimed at truth or the real. The definition of something, of X, in this case justice, that survives all objections. We'll see how that works. But are there any questions about what gets us to this point? Because what we're at now is the story's over, and now we're going to enter into dialectic. But it's good to know how we got here, what the question is, why the question matters, how we're going to proceed. Okay, all right. Well, what is Socrates' objection? If I came in and you asked me, what is justice? And I said, it's telling the truth and repaying your debts. Imagine you're Socrates. What would you say to me that shows that that can't be right? It's a simple little scenario.
Objection by Socrates?
Yes. Here's the scenario. You have a sword. I say, and we're friends, can I borrow the sword? So let's imagine this is the sword. Can I borrow the sword?
Here you go.
Thank you. I borrow the sword. Then I go crazy. My mind gets deranged. Excuse me, I've gotten it backwards. You're my friend. I lend you the sword.
And it starts.
And I go crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Then I say, give me my sword back. Should he give me the sword back? If I'm crazed, if I'm full of anger, and I'm talking about how I'm going to execute people, strangers, because I'm so angry, should he repay his debt? He borrowed, I messed it up the first time, I'm sorry. He borrowed it from me, now I want it back. He owes me my sword. Should he give me my sword? Because I'm going to get it, and I'm going to go and start slashing people. Randomly. You think you should? No.
I think so.
No, you should not give me the sword. It would not be just for you to give me the sword. Socrates assumes. And if it wouldn't be just for you to give me the sword, then it wouldn't be just for you to repay your debt to me, which is, in this case, my sword. So justice cannot be the repaying of debts. They don't talk about telling the truth, but we could come up with an example. In World War II in Europe, the Germans removed the Jews from society and put them in camps, and some people hid the Jews in their houses, and when the Nazi soldiers came by and said, do you have a Jew in your house? Should you say, yes, I've got a Jew in my house? If this is an accurate account of justice, then you should say, yes, I have a Jew in my house. I'm a just person. Or is it not just to say, no, I don't? I don't presume to know the answer to that question, or we don't need to discuss it unless you want to, but what Socrates is doing is he's saying it can't be that simple. That can't be the right definition. Because he assumes that a definition will have no objections of that sort. That if you define justice as this and that and so on, every just thing will have that characteristic and no unjust thing will have that characteristic. Any questions then? This is a model for how the whole thing goes. This is the simple model. It's going to get complicated. This is the simple model though. Cephalus, tell us what justice is. You're an old man. You've told us that justice is crucial for having a good life. I'll tell you what it is. It's telling the truth and repaying your debts. It can't be that, because sometimes it's just to lie, and sometimes it's just to not repay your debts. If there are no questions, we'll move on to Polemarchus. Polemarchus is Cephalus' son. And so Polemarchus inherits the argument, which is to say Cephalus, when Cephalus meets this objection, he says, I appreciate you've come, Socrates, I have to go make a sacrifice. And he leaves. Which is, I always thought was strange because he says, I'm so glad you've come down to Piraeus. I love having philosophical conversations. The conversation lasts 2 minutes and then he leaves. I think I'm not as critical of this man as I used to be. I used to think he was a hypocrite. Now I think he's old, he's lived his life, he's lived a pretty good life. He's got these sons. Unfortunately, they end up dying in this war. Of course, he also runs a factory with slaves and makes arms for a war. So it's a complicated life, but he's lived it. And he has thoughts about how you should live your life that he's based his life on. He's going to die soon. He's not going to change his mind. The conversation really doesn't have much benefit for him. So he goes to perform a sacrifice because he's thinking more about the next stage, namely death. He's not so interested as these young men are in how should I live my life? For them, it's a live question. How should I live my life? For this old man, it's not a question anymore. He's already lived his life. Polemarchus, his son, inherits the argument. He says, my dad was right, but he wasn't precise enough. So they forget about this and they just focus on this. Justice is repaying your debts, but you owe different things to different people. To friends, you owe benefit. And to enemies, you owe harm. And so his definition is justice equals, so if this was justice equals, here we have justice equals benefiting friends, harming enemies. This is a very traditional Greek notion of justice. That the Greek citizen, the Greek man, he has obligations to his family especially, but not just your biological family, everybody who is a client of yours, who looks up to you for material support and protection, and you benefit those people. Anyone who threatens your family, you harm those people. And that's what justice is.
Sounds like death penalty.
What?
Death penalty.
Death penalty. Well, in the extreme case, oh, I see, you're saying like nowadays, what would it be? Justice would be benefit. It would have to then be the state rewards people who are good and it executes people who are bad. Yes. Yes, whatever. Yeah, no, I can see that. One thing that's missing here that we'll see is that there's no notion of goodness. So let's say I'm friends with these two students and I'm enemies with the rest of you. If Polemarchus is right, then I should benefit them and I should harm you. But what if she's a bad person? And what if you're a good person? Then I would be benefiting a bad person and I would be harming a good person. Polemarchus is confused, as we'll see, but there are people who I know who hold this as justice. They don't care about what's good and what's bad. They care about loyalty. This is somebody for whom justice equals loyalty. I should say, for him, justice equals business. Now, that's not in Plato. I'm stepping out and I'm saying, if you gotta think of one word that summarizes Cephalus' attitude towards justice, it's a businessman's notion of justice. It's contracts and being honest in your contracts. He's a wealthy businessman. He got his notion of justice from how he lived his life, as a businessman. Polemarchus turns out to be the leader of the democratic faction in a civil war. He's a soldier. His notion of justice is loyalty. If you're on my side, I help you. If you're my enemy, I hurt you. End of story. Any questions about anything so far? Now we're going to get into the subtleties. But before we do so, we want to be clear about everything. Clear? Okay. All right. Well, whereas there was one objection against Cephalus, there are 4 objections against Polemachus, just as there are 4 objections against Thrasymachus. So I spent the whole weekend thinking, should I give them all 4? It's going to get confusing. I'll give you all 4 in each case, and then we can talk about the ones you find interesting. I also found that it's very hard not to give all 4, because if you give one, you kind of have to have the others. We'll see. The assumption in all of these objections is that justice is a techne. So we already discussed techne, craft, expertise, skill. There's the techne of carpentry, horsemanship, sailing. And now Socrates is assuming justice is like that. If you read the dialogue and you don't notice this, it just happens. He never says, let's first start by assuming that justice is a craft. But we philosophers, we know that when you're in a discussion, in a debate, oftentimes the first thing that gets assumed is the most important thing. And the entire discussion is framed by that. This whole discussion is framed by this assumption. Most people, I think, nowadays would not think that justice is a techne or a craft. It's a strange assumption. Plato has built into his whole dialogue this assumption, and what all of these are is a type of knowledge. Plato has linked up implicitly justice and knowledge. Just from the introduction, first few pages of your book, talking about the flower, the 2 flowers. Tennyson plucks one, and the other, Basho. Basho doesn't pluck it. Tennyson plucks it in order to study it, to acquire knowledge of it. He thinks that's how I get close to God, is by achieving knowledge. Basho doesn't pluck it. I think he's not looking for that kind of knowledge. He's looking for something else. We can talk about that or not, but all I'm trying to do here is highlight Plato is building in that knowledge and justice are connected. Once we've made that clear, it's easier to follow the dialectic. Socrates says, all right, if this is justice, and it's a craft, what domain does justice help you benefit your friends and harm your enemies? Because every craft has a domain. This is what we talked about when you were sitting over there. So what's the domain of carpentry? What does it deal with? Carpentry is focused on wood. So if you're my friend and I want to benefit you, if you need a house, what craft do I use to benefit her? Or she needs a table. I use carpentry. But if I'm a carpenter and he's sick, I can't benefit him with carpentry. What do I need to benefit him? I need the craft of medicine. If you want to go from Honshu to Okinawa, what craft do I need?
Aircraft.
Oh, aircraft. Okay, very good. I was thinking in old-fashioned times, sailing, but sure. Aircraft, or something that jumps over oceans. So if you want to benefit your friends and harm your enemies, you need to know what they need, and then you need the craft that addresses their need. So Socrates says, well, if justice is benefiting your friends and harming your enemies, it looks like all the other crafts cover benefiting and harming. Where does justice fit in? What's its special domain? And Polemachus gives a bad answer that sets up the objection. The bad answer is, it helps you in alliances, so in wars, and it helps you in business transactions. And then, we don't want to get into the weeds too much, but Socrates says, well, wait a second, if you want to benefit your friend in an alliance, you should have the craft of sailing or the craft of archery. You should have some military crafts. How does justice help? Or if you're in a business with somebody and you want to, build a house together for your business, well, then the craft of carpentry helps. What has justice got to do with it? And here's where Polemachus makes his first mistake. He says, no, it's when you're not using the things. So if we're working together on a house, carpentry is what we need. But if we make money from the house that we sell, and she deposits it with me, if I don't steal it, if I keep it until she needs it, that's benefiting her. And justice keeps me from stealing it. So Socrates says, oh, so you think justice is for when things are useless. Because if we're doing something like building a house, carpentry. If we're doing something like helping you get better, medicine. If we're doing something like taking you to Okinawa, sailing, and so on. But if you just got some money and you're not going to do anything with it, you deposit it with me and I don't steal it, then that's just. That's how I benefit you, by dealing with something that we don't use? That's taken to be a decisive objection. Now, as I said from the beginning, this is all dialectic. This is all looking for the truth. If you read this, I'll just say personally, when I read this the first 15, 20 times, I didn't notice something that I notice now, which is, every single one of these objections can be answered with an understanding of justice that Plato develops in the rest of the dialogue. So this is like an exercise. If you read it the first time, certainly you think, okay, Polemachus has his definition and Socrates refutes it. Well, it's kind of weird. Why does he refute it 4 times? The reason, what's going on here, is that he refutes it with this, but Polemachus could reply with a much better answer than the one he gives. And then the question is, well, why didn't Plato just write the better answer? What do you think? Plato's writing a dialogue. He's giving it to you to read. It has a dialectic. You imagine the 2 characters. One of them puts forward a definition. Another one says, here's an objection. This guy's not smart enough to see that he could answer it. You could then just keep reading on and think, oh, well, Plato's showing Socrates just beating this guy up intellectually, just refuting everything he says. What would be the point of that?
Maybe that's what you talked about like last week.
Exactly.
Like Plato's collection of works written sounds like, which is like education.
Exactly. Yes. So I'm so happy. Last week, I think right at the beginning, the first day, the first 5 minutes, he asked me, where does the Republic fit in Plato's career? And I told him what I was taught, maybe what you were taught as well, that Plato had 3 phases in his career: his early dialogues, his middle dialogues, his late dialogue. And the early dialogues end in puzzles, and the middle dialogues have doctrines, and then the late dialogues have complexity. I don't believe that anymore. Most American scholars don't believe it anymore. I'm not saying it's definitively false, but I think there's a better way of understanding the dialogues. That instead of thinking Plato wrote a certain kind when he was young, and another kind when he was middle-aged, and another kind when he was old, he wrote 3 types of dialogues all throughout his career. Some were for early students who were just beginning philosophy. Others are for mid-range students, and others are for advanced students. This book is unlike the rest of Republic. You'll see when we read 2, 3, and 4 in the next few days. This is like an early dialogue, quote-unquote early dialogue, because it ends in puzzles. Here's a definition, it's refuted. But what's the correct definition, Socrates? It's not given. It is given in book 4, but for now, it's not given. When people in the late 19th, up to the mid-20th century in America were really beholden to the idea of the chronological arrangement of dialogues, they thought that this was an early dialogue, and then Plato wrote the books 2 through 10 when he was middle-aged and tacked it on, which of course follows if that's what you believe. As I say, I'm not going to refute that, it's just not what I believe. What I believe is he can write in many styles. He's one of the great literary geniuses of all time. He can write in a quote-unquote early style to draw you into the dialogue. This is why it's a great introduction to philosophy. Anyone who's never read philosophy can approach this without knowing anything else about philosophy and see very quickly, first of all, what dialectic is and how hard it is. That you put forward ideas and, oh, I didn't realize there are 4 problems. Here's this guy who's, a sophist, who's a genius about justice. Many, many problems. But more deeply, Socrates makes these objections. He makes this one, for example, justice has no domain. But the better answer that Polemarchus should have given is not that justice is for useless things, but justice is for everything. So if I want to benefit her and she needs a house, carpentry. If I want to benefit him and he needs health, medicine. If I want to benefit him and he has to go to Okinawa, sailing. But if I am a carpenter and I want to benefit her, I don't do it by doing carpentry unjustly. If I make her a cheap house just to make money, and I use wood, but I use my knowledge of carpentry, nobody can build a cheap house like a good carpenter. I could make a house that looks good and it will last for maybe 5, 10 years, but because I'm a good carpenter, I saved money at all the right points, and I know that in 11 years it will collapse. I'd have to be a pretty good carpenter to get away with that. So if I'm a good carpenter and unjust, I won't benefit her. To benefit her, I have to be a good carpenter and just. Let's do medicine. If I'm a very good physician, I know how to cure him, but I also know how to poison him. If I'm just doing this for the money, I can use my excellence in medicine to make him feel healthy for a while. But I'm really doing it unjustly for the money, and I haven't benefited him all, and so on for sailing. So that's not here. You won't read that in this dialogue. I'm just kidding. I won't give you the answer for all of them, but there is an answer in every instance. And I think what Plato wanted us to do, certainly this has been my experience, is read this however many times. As I say, I've read it 50 times maybe. And it wasn't until like the 20th time that I thought, oh my God, there's an answer. And there's an answer, there's an answer, there's an answer. And I did it on my own. In other words, it's not that he told me what I should think and then I took it on the way the prisoner takes on the image. It's that I used my mind to think, wait a second. And that's kind of like an act of turning. I did it myself. So when we did the cave and we had time, we talked about it's possible to escape the cave by yourself. But for the most part, you need someone to come in and loosen you. And if what I'm describing to me happened, Plato came and loosened me, but I had to do it myself. He couldn't just tell me the answer, because if he just told me the answer, that would be like I'm just assimilating some more information. So I didn't do it entirely by myself. I wasn't forced to do it by him, something in between. That's the act of writing a dialogue. a true dialogue, where you're not just making it entertaining, but you're writing in a way that's turning someone's soul. Very slowly. Any questions about the domain? We already did the power. Every craft can be used for good or bad. The best poisoner is a physician. The best, well, you name it. The best horse trainer can also ruin horses the most easily. The best sailor is the one who really knows how to sink the ship, and so on. And that's taken to be an objection, but the answer is that justice is special. It's not one craft like all the others. It stands above the crafts and supervises that they not be used in the bad way, that they only be used in the good way. So let me give you a diagram. Carpentry, medicine, sailing, that's okay, I'll stop there, etc., etc., a million crafts. Justice. Justice is like a supervisory craft over all the crafts. Well, what does it do? What is its supervision? That comes up in the third objection. I've already given you the third objection. Socrates says, oh, if justice is benefiting your friends and harming your enemies, then if you make a mistake and your friend is a bad person, or your enemy is a good person, you're going to end up benefiting bad people and harming good people. And justice wouldn't do that. Now, I started by saying, I know people who are like Lemurgus. They wouldn't care about that objection. They don't think there is such a thing as good people and bad people. It's just my people and everyone else. So Socrates is assuming something. Justice is, I hesitate to use this word, but moral in the sense of it's about goodness. He's assuming that. And so she seems good to me, but she's actually bad. He seems bad to me, but he's actually good. I think of her as a friend, I think of him as an enemy. Socrates is saying there's a problem because there's a distinction between how people seem and how they are. They might seem like they're your friend, but they're actually your enemy. They might seem like they're your enemy, but they're actually your friend. And again, that's taken as a refutation, an objection. The answer, I guess I am giving you the answers. The answer is that justice, this special craft, it's an expertise in goodness. The just person is an expert in goodness, which is to say, the ideal is he doesn't make mistakes. So if I'm friends to her, it's because I've judged her to be good, and I don't get that wrong. And if I'm an enemy to you, it's because I've judged you to be bad, and I don't make mistakes about bad people. Why don't we pause there before I do the final of the four? It would be good to have a discussion about this, because otherwise you might get lost. It's like a maze. If you have no questions, that's fine, but I'm thinking there are two types of questions. One would be, a question about the details. Tell me again about this or that. Mm-hmm. Another question would be sort of, why are they assuming this? Or what in the world is going on?
Well, 広がっちゃうね。It's very interesting. I understand the how to say system.
Yes.
The model, and I think in this case, justice is a, how do you say?
Supercraft. That's what I call it.
Yeah, meta.
Meta, yes, yes. Meta's the
Yeah.
Greek, super's the Latin.
Okay, then the same, can we think the same meta dimension on goodness?
No. Not, Plato doesn't think so.
Oh,
Plato thinks goodness is the last stop.
okay, yeah.
That we're on a train of knowledge, and when you get to goodness, that's the final stop.
Okay. So, good and bad is how do you say? 普遍的ってなんていうの?
Foundational?
Yeah, let's say foundation
Yes.
or no doubt for everybody,
Yes. Yes.
not partial,
Oh, partial, relative?
relative.
Yes. Yes.
So let's say absolute,
Yes.
absolute goodness.
Yes. Yes. So this is going to be the theme in books 6 and 7. But let me give you a taste of where this is coming from. So, take this. What is it? So, what is it is the question. The answer is the what it is. This is a Greek expression, the what it is. In Latin, that comes as the essence, just being. But never mind the technical. Straightforward answer, this is watch. So that's the word we use. But what's the essence of the watch? What makes a watch a watch? This is not a watch. This is a watch. What makes this a watch?
It can show the time.
It tells time.
Yeah.
Okay. What is this? Water bottle. What is the essence, or what is the what it is of the water bottle? What?
In water?
It holds water.
In house, yeah.
Okay. And so on. Marker, and so I can keep going. What makes this a bad watch versus a good watch?
Correctly?
Correct time.
Yeah.
It's a good watch if it tells time well. In English we have the adverb well, but that's the adjective is good. This holds water well. Then it's a good. Then it's a good water bottle. If this tells time, but it falls behind like 5 minutes every day, what do you call it?
Bad.
A bad watch. So it's not a good watch, it's a bad watch. Is this, which also doesn't tell time well, a bad watch? No, it's not a watch at all. So this is not trying to tell time. So it can't fail to tell time. It just doesn't even try. This can succeed or fail at what it's trying to do, which is tell time. And if it succeeds, then it's a good watch. If it fails, it's a bad watch. And if I hit it with a hammer, then it's not a watch at all. It used to be a watch, but it no longer is a watch. So the what it is of a watch is good watch. The what it is of the water bottle is good water bottle. The essence of anything is its goodness. And what is goodness? That's the thing that appears whenever something is good. I don't expect that'll make a lot of sense to people who are not trained in philosophy, but he and I have a language, and he asked a very good question. I wanted him to get a sense of where it's going. the whole world, for anyone, the whole world is what it is because of goodness. There's some goodness here, there's some goodness there, there's more here, there's less here. But if there were no goodness, there would be no being. Or most simply, the world is good. Plato thinks the world is good. Doesn't mean there isn't evil. There is evil. But evil is a failure to be good. While we're on this subject, you of course are familiar, the ancient atomists in Greece. So Lucretius is one, he's a Roman. The original is Epicurus, Democritus. So this is 5th century BC. That's a contemporary of Plato, actually. Epicurus is 4th century BC. This is 1st century BC. He's Roman. They're Greek. Anyway, the atomists believe, as many people nowadays believe, the world is neither good nor bad. It just has stuff in it. Atoms, the chemical elements. And you put hydrogen with oxygen, you get water. That's not good, that's just what you get when you combine hydrogen and oxygen. And there are galaxies distant where chemical reactions are happening, and it's neither good nor bad. So too here. We confusingly think that it's good or bad because we have our own wishes, and if it goes with our wishes, we call it good, and if it goes against our wishes, we call it bad. But in the nature of the world, there's neither good nor bad. It's a very common worldview nowadays, the ancient atomistic worldview. That's not Plato's worldview. Plato's worldview is the world is good. And I've given you a quick and cheap, but for now, that's fine, a quick and cheap demonstration that the world is good. Namely, for anything to be what it is, it has to have some goodness. If you take away the goodness of this watch, then it's not a watch at all. It doesn't exist as a watch.
Greek word, arete.
Yes?
Arete.
Yes? Virtue?
Virtue, yeah.
So the virtue is the goodness of the watch, or whatever. This is a virtuous watch. It's a strange thing to say. What it means is it tells time well. Shunya is a virtuous man because he stands his ground in battle. That's like telling the time well, doing what a watch should do, standing your ground in battle, that's what a man should do. No difference for Plato, whether it's a human being or a watch. Everything has a function, or a purpose, or a virtue. And if it lacks that completely, it doesn't exist.
Can I ask something?
By all means.
Let's say criminal.
Yes.
Criminal
Yes.
virtue is crime,
Right, like a poisoner.
like a poisoner.
A poisoner, you can have a craft of poisoning. But what is the craft of poisoning? It's the bad use of medicine. So remember, crafts have powers for good or bad. And what is the difference between the doctor and the poisoner? The doctor uses that power for justice. The poisoner doesn't use it for justice. And what is justice? Expertise and goodness. So the doctor is connected with goodness in a way that the criminal is not. Which means that the criminal, the poisoner, is like a shadow of the real craft, which is using it for, as all crafts should be, for justice.
What I wanted to ask you
Yes.
is that, like, here's a knife,
Yes.
and knife is really good at like stabbing someone or
Yes.
killing someone.
Yes.
Is that also virtue?
Is it also
Virtue?
of the knife? Sure.
I mean, yeah.
Yes. Yes. So that's his example at the end of book 1. a knife's function is cutting. A pruning knife, I don't know how it comes out in the Japanese, but it's a knife for cutting trees so that you get better growth the next spring. I'm not an arborist, so I don't know how you do it. Like the cherry trees in Kyoto, people tend the trees and they cut the branches so that new ones grow even stronger. Pruning. I don't know what you call this in Japanese, but there's a special knife. I don't even know what it looks like. But he's saying the virtue of a knife, a generic knife, is cutting. The virtue of a pruning knife is pruning, which is a special kind of cutting. So every knife has its own virtue. It has its meta virtue, cutting, and then it's got pruning, slashing. Like the katana has a very special virtue that the samurai use, exactly. But those are just knives. That's different from people using the knives. The samurai might think, I use the katana for justice. I have a code. This is how you should use the katana. Someone might pick up a katana and become very good at using it, but if they don't have the samurai code, they're a shadow of what they should be.
Yeah, but I think his question is, for example, the atomic bomb has a virtue?
An excellence, yes.
Nee.
Yes.
Yeah. So, how to say, the
Well, let's take, can I talk from that?
oh
The atomic power, atomic bomb, atomic power plant.
yeah.
So you've got this thing, you can use it for slashing and cutting, or you can use it for surgery.
Yeah.
Knives can do both. And justice would supervise it for the use in nuclear energy. Injustice would be using it in Hiroshima.
What's the opposite word for arete?
Vice.
That's a vice.
悪徳やね。
Kakia.
Kakia.
Yeah, so kakos is bad.
Oh, yeah.
Kakia is badness. Vice.
Vice.
Agathos is good. But then when we say virtue, we go to arete.
So I'm really getting confused.
Sure.
You know, atomic bomb has a virtue or vice. I don't know. For United States people, that's a virtue maybe, but
Not me, and most Americans now think it was a terrible mistake. So
yeah, it's back in the day. But now, Japanese, especially Hiroshima, all Japanese, maybe that could be vice or not. I'm
Yeah.
very kind
well,
of confused.
we need to
Yeah.
distinguish between the instrument on its own versus the use of the instrument.
Mm,
So remember, I could lay out all kinds of knives.
mm,
Some of them are excellent knives. I mean, if you are into knives, some knives like, oh wow, what a beautiful katana,
mm.
or what a beautiful steak knife, or oh, that's a cheap, ugly knife. So the knives can have virtues and vices. But then there's the coming and picking them up and using them. That can be virtuous or vicious. If I find, oh, look at this beautiful knife. It's a virtuous knife for surgery. And then I do surgery. And I'm a virtuous surgeon. I could also take that knife and be a murderer. Virtuous knife, still virtuous knife, virtuous use, vicious use of the virtuous knife.
So I feel like I'm kind of getting back to the question you
Yeah.
posed. Like, you know, like, we cannot guess what's gonna happen, you know. Like, maybe she's a bad person, she looks bad person, but she is a really good person.
Right.
I feel like it's kind of similar question here is going on, you know. Yeah, so you cannot guess what's going to happen by using the knife or atomic power, you know. Maybe it's going to kill Japanese, but it's going to create the electrical power. It looks like the first one is the vicious, the other one looks like virtuous, you know. But still we don't know. It's virtual advice, so I'm kind of,
Yeah, well, we don't know. It requires another craft to find out what justice is. And that's the craft of philosophy. So there are these crafts, but how should we use them? Should we keep healing people? I mean, look, take this example. Medicine sounds like such a nice thing. Well, it's been effective for about 100 years, basically since before the First World War, doctors probably caused as many deaths as they caused cures. With the discovery of penicillin and, you know, just cleanliness in the surgery, with the First World War, pretty much, as I understand it, medicine became effective for the first time. Well, with every generation of medicine, we have more people who would have died who live. Before the invention of medicine, people died that now would live. And the reason they got sick is they had bad genes. Now they're living. And they're reproducing. And they're having children with bad genes. So with every generation of medicine, the human species is becoming, as we say in English, more dysgenic. Namely, more and more genetic problems are arising because the filter that evolution has always used to keep the species basically healthy has been removed. Now, I'm not making any claims about what should be done about this, but I'm acknowledging the fact that medicine might, in the long run, be a very bad thing for the human species. And I think this is to your point. We don't know. We don't know. But what Plato is saying is, the knowledge of what goodness is and how to put it into practice, that would be wisdom. That's what philosophy is seeking. We're calling it justice for now. And you might think that's impossible, you might be right, but Plato's positing this idea of a super or meta craft that knows what goodness is and can supervise the rest of the city. You can see the political dimension. This would be the best leader, the one who sees how things should be done for the sake of goodness.
But we don't know.
Not unless we're philosophers, no. But we're not completely ignorant either.
Yeah.
I think we can look at many things and say that shouldn't have been done, or that should have been done. Shall I continue? Or should we talk more about any of that? Continue? Okay. So we have one more objection against Polemarchus. And remember his definition, benefiting friends and harming enemies. This one focuses on harming enemies. And Socrates thinks justice doesn't harm enemies, because justice doesn't do any harm at all. Here's why. This should be easy for us. We've already built up the resources. If I want to harm this, what is the best way to harm this?
Harmless.
Well, look, see this? Watch. I just stomped on it. Did I harm it?
You did.
I didn't. No, it's the same.
Ah.
It's the same. Okay, now I'm going to do it with this. No, I won't. Because that will harm it. So you harm something differently based on what it is. When I stomp on the book, I don't harm its essence because its essence is to convey information with words, and I haven't harmed the words at all. The essence of this is to tell time. If I stomp on this, I destroy its essence. It can't tell time anymore. So the lesson there, or just to take another example, how would I harm this? I could stomp, it's very powerful, so I can stomp on it. Nothing will happen. What do I need to do? Put a drill. Then I've harmed it. When you want to harm something, find out what its essence is and attack that. So here, again, Socrates makes an assumption, like the assumptions we have here. Justice is arete, virtue. Justice is a virtue. What's the virtue of this? Correct time. What's the virtue of this? Human being. Well, they assume it's justice. So it's not just that justice is a virtue, justice is virtue. So if I harm this by attacking its time telling, how would I harm this? How could you harm me best?
Sorry, I'm gonna stop you.
No, no. Because although you would kill me, you wouldn't have harmed my essence.
Oh.
Remember? Essence is doing the virtue. So, what's the essence of this? Telling time, and its virtue is telling time well. What is my essence? What is my virtue as a human being? Again, we didn't argue for this. He doesn't argue for it. He's just assuming it. My virtue is justice. So if you want to harm me, what would you have to do? It sounds strange, but I didn't say the thought out loud. You'd have to harm my justice. It sounds strange, but I don't think it's so strange. Think of somebody who lives a life, a just life, and then dies, let's say of natural causes, or dies on the battlefield in a heroic act. They've had the knife put in them, as you imagined, and they've been harmed in their body, but not in who they were. Versus somebody who's lived a just life and then does something very unjust and spoils his life. He tells a lie or he betrays somebody in a way that he can never recover from. Socrates thinks that that person has been harmed much more than if they simply died. For what it's worth, that's what he's thinking. And so the argument then is, if you harm something by attacking its virtue, and justice is human virtue, if justice is harming enemies, what would you have to do to your enemy? It's not enough to stab them. What would you have to do to your enemy to really harm him? Based on the argument. I'll help you out. I'll use his examples. The virtue of a horse is to run fast. How do you really harm a horse?
Breaking legs.
You break the legs. You take its virtue and you go right after the virtue. So, virtuous horse, fast horse. Harming horse, break its virtue, break its legs. Human being, virtue is justice. You want to harm a human being? What should you do? Make that human
Injustice.
unjust. Yes. So in Christianity, there's the notion of Satan. What does Satan do? I mean, sure, I'm sure he kills people every once in a while, but what he really does is he goes after your virtue and he corrupts you from within. He thinks, that's how I really harm you. It's by tricking you, tempting you to be evil, to betray your friend, to lie, betray your country, whatever. And so finally, Socrates thinks, put it all together. Justice can't do harm because justice to harm an enemy would have to make the enemy unjust. Justice can't cause injustice. And that's the end of Polemicus.
Well, again, please. Justice cannot
Cause,
cause an injustice.
just like fire can't cause snow. Fire can only cause heat. Ice can't cause fire, ice can only cause cold. Justice can only cause justice. It can't cause injustice. So if justice is harming an enemy, and an enemy is a human being, and what it is to be a human being is to have this virtue. If you're going to harm your enemy, you'd have to make him more unjust. Justice would require making somebody more unjust. That's like fire causing someone to be less hot.
今のね、正義はだから正義しか生まない公是。正義が原因となって起こるものは正義、不正義は生み出せないみたいな。原理的にそうだ。火がなんか水を生み出せないと同じ。
Let's move on to Thrasymachus, because we have half an hour, and we definitely have to get through this if we're going to stay all on track in the course. Because this is the really powerful part of Book 1. This is all just leading up to this. It's this that provokes him. He's been sitting there, as it's described. People are holding him back. He's so eager to get involved in the conversation. And when he starts speaking, Socrates says it's as if a lion has roared into the middle of the room. So Thrasymachus is described from the beginning as an angry person. Cannot control his passions. It's been a friendly conversation up to this point. Now it's gone, eristic. Now it becomes debate. Now it becomes opponents, enemies. And what has finally provoked him is this. This assumption that Socrates makes, that justice is virtue. Because according to Thrasymachus' whole way of thinking, justice is not a virtue. Justice is not even really a vice, it's just foolish. That will become clear once you see what he thinks justice is. So let's erase, get some space for him. Thrasymachus, does anyone remember how he defines it? Because it's a very simple definition, but to appreciate what he's saying takes a lot more than just one sentence. I'll give you a hint. He calls it, in English, an advantage. But an advantage of a certain kind of person. So here's his definition. So his style is angry, aggressive, hostile, vain, etc. His definition: justice equals the advantage of the stronger. And this definition really has just two parts, and these objections are examining the two parts. So first, the stronger. Socrates says, there's this wrestler named Polydamas, and he eats 10 pounds of beef every day, so he's the strongest, and it's advantageous for him to eat 10 pounds of beef, so justice is eating 10 pounds of beef. This is not unusual for Socrates. very simple, straightforward objection. And in the spirit of conversation, it can be amusing and it can make things clearer. Because all he's getting at is, Thrasymachus doesn't mean physical strength. He means political strength. But Thrasymachus thinks that Socrates is humiliating him. You're talking about wrestlers and beef. I'm not talking about wrestlers and beef. I'm talking about tyrants, criminals, power, fame, money, and so on. You're taking my political philosophy and reducing it to a farce. Because Thrasymachus doesn't think that he's in a conversation where they're pursuing the truth together. He thinks he's in a debate where you win by humiliating your opponent. And he thinks Socrates is trying to humiliate him. So that makes him even angrier. So, this is an objection. It's meant to be a joke, but it does at least highlight, we're talking about political strength. So, think about a king. He's the stronger. He has his subjects. Let's say they give 10% of their money to the king in taxes. That's to his advantage. That's how the king gets his money. What does he want the subjects to believe about taxes? So it's to his advantage. Taxes are to the advantage of the king. How does he want his subjects to give their taxes? He wants them to give them, but he doesn't want them to hate giving them and think it's terrible that they have to give them, because then they won't. And he'll have to send out his police, and he'll have to arrest everyone who doesn't give the taxes, and if they all won't give the taxes, then he's done. There'll be a revolution. So you can't, through mere physical force, control a population. You're few, in this case one, they're many. The one always loses against the many in a contest of physical force. But what advantage can the one use?
Power.
Well, not physical power. Political power.
Political and money.
Well, he wants to get the money, but in order to get the money, he needs to do something. It's not enough to send out the police to make everyone give the money, because if they all say no, it won't work. Many of them, most of them, have to do it willingly. And yes, you send the police to the few rebels, but the only way the system works is if most people give it willingly. Think about when you pay taxes. Why are you doing it?
The government give us good welfare.
Okay. So you think that, I want to tease out the answer without saying it. I think you have the right answer. So imagine I'm the government and I say, give me, I don't know what your tax rate is, but 40% of your money. And is it enough for you to think, well, I'm going to build roads and I'm going to build subways and so on. You know what? I've only been in Japan a week, but I think you're getting a pretty good deal. This is a very highly functioning society. If I were paying 40%, I would think, you know, I'm getting my money's worth. In America, you'd have to constantly like, what are they doing with my money? So I'm asking you, I guess, a question that wouldn't work in an American classroom, but it's working perfectly here. So you give me the money if I'm the government. You give it willingly because you think you're getting a good deal. This transaction is just. If I, as the government, can get you to believe that doing this is just, it'll work. And if I can't convince you that it's just, it's not going to last much longer. I don't have enough police to make everybody give me 10%. Because after all, the police are going to want to cut and the system's going to collapse. So, Thrasymachus' point about the advantage of the stronger is justice. I'm going to put quotation marks around it because it's not something real. It's what we say in English, ideology. It's something made up that the stronger, the ruler, uses to get the subjects to cooperate. And how do you get a population to believe in ideology? Education. Quote unquote. Because here it's not about teaching them what's real, because there's no real justice, teaching them what they need to believe so that I can get my money. And if it's not money, it's power. I want to stay in power. I want to have more power. If I can get the next generation to believe that I deserve that power, it will be very easy for me to exercise it. Take COVID, just comes to mind. It's a good example in America. I don't know how it unfolded here, but the government got a lot more power as a result in America. A lot more power because of COVID. Mandatory vaccines. In the end, they didn't succeed, but they tried. But there was a lot of cultural pressure to get the vaccine. And it gave the government a lot of power that it hasn't really given up. It's kept that. And in order to get the vaccine accepted by as many people as it did, it had to lie. It had to use education, quote unquote. And I have a lot of friends who still believe those lies and are still willing to give the government that much power because they've been propagandized by the ideology. They think it's just to cooperate in that system. I've already said what's next. This is the rule of the one. There are names for the rule of the few and the rule of the many. The rule of the few is oligarchy. It's just Greek for rule of few, sometimes called aristocracy. We discuss that. We'll discuss the differences between the two. And then what's the rule of the many? Democracy. So who is powerful in the democracy? The people, the many. People, whoever they are. And then who is typically powerful in the oligarchy or the aristocracy?
Aristocrats.
Yeah, and then if you're being as cynical as possible, what do you think they are? They think of themselves as the best people, but they're always, at the very least, the rich. And then here you have the king, whoever that is. And if you think the king's doing a good job, it's a king. If you think the king's doing a bad job, in English, the tyrant. We're going to discuss all these constitutions when we get to the political sections. But Thrasymachus raises these here because he's trying to show that this simple definition of justice applies to every kind of society. Because the people are stronger here, how will justice be understood here? Well, whatever's advantageous to the people. So, let's take here. Let's take taxes. In an oligarchy ruled by the rich, what kind of tax policy do you usually get? Who pays the most taxes, who pays the least?
Taxes for the land.
So who would those people be?
オリガルキーっていう加藤政治の場合は誰が一番たくさん税金を払って誰が一番少なく払うか。
一応この本の中に政治体制の話が出てくるの後ろの方にいくつかあるんですよ。でどれがいいとか鉄人政治が一番いいんだけど、民主制はあんま良くないですよね、この考え方は。今加藤制と選手制が王様一人っていうのは選手制なんで。
Explain about oligarchy and
この最後。
Well, we don't have to get into the details of these. We'll do it later. But to appreciate the depth of what he's saying, it helps to distinguish them. He does. He distinguishes them very quickly. Oligarchy is rule of the rich. Democracy is rule of the poor. I'm being quick here. Kingship is rule of the one, whoever that is. Now I'm just saying, think about these two types of country. Remember the beginning? The Acropolis and the Piraeus, ruled by the poor, the democracy, ruled by the few, the rich. This is always in the background of Greek politics of this era. We could talk about all kinds of laws, and we will later, but think about tax law. Who pays most of the taxes in an oligarchy? Imagine you're rich. It'll be easy this way. Imagine you're rich. Let's say we're all the rich people in Japan, and we rule this country, and we're going to make a tax policy to our advantage. Who will pay the taxes? Will it be us?
Poor people.
The poor people will pay the taxes. And we won't pay any taxes. We will live off their money. But let's say they kill us in a revolution, and then it's the rule of the poor. Who will pay the taxes then? Or I made it hard for me. Let's say they don't kill us. They just take control, and everyone gets one vote. Who will pay the taxes now? The rich will pay the taxes, because it's to the advantage of the rulers, which is to say the poor. So his definition is justice is the advantage of the ruler. The political stronger, which equals the ruler. And taxes are just one example. Military service, privileges, you name it. Go through all of the laws. Every country has a regime of a certain type with a certain kind of ruler. And those laws, that notion of justice that prevails in each one of these will favor the rulers and disfavor, make it harder for everybody else. And justice is simply the ideology. It's the image. Think of the king. It's always simplest to think of one man. He wants all of his subjects to believe that it's just for them to give him their money. He doesn't just go to them and say, it's just for you to give me. No, he might establish churches where God is, there's a text and the priests read the text, and the text says, God says you should pay 1/10 of your taxes to the king. Or there might be a television channel with regular advertisements, with happy children giving 1/10 of their family's money to the divine leader. So, whether it's priests, or advertisers, or teachers, and here I'll put quote unquote, they're going to be the ones that will give this education. Another word is propaganda. And the purpose of the propaganda will be to give the advantage to the ruler. You can see it clearly in a one-party state like North Korea. It takes more subtlety and wisdom to see it here. To see how, if we're really in a democracy, and I don't presume to understand Japan yet, but in America, that's how we think of ourselves. That's not actually what we are, but we think of ourselves that way. And so we're trained to think, for example, equality equals justice. Whether you're poor or you're rich, you're equal. And Plato will go on in Book 8 to show whether you're a man or a woman, you're equal. No matter your race, you're equal, etc., etc. Equality is the same as justice. And in oligarchy, equality does not equal justice. The rich are better than the poor. Or men are better than women, or one race is better than another race, and so on. To think equality is justice is a very democratic notion. In America, even to teach this and say this out loud makes people uncomfortable, because our country is such a democratic country in its ideology, even if not in its reality. And where do kids get those views from? Well, in America, they get them from teachers, they get them from the TV, they get them from the churches, they get them from the movies, from the stories. It's everywhere. And once you see it, you can't unsee it, and it's a lot like the cave. If you turn away from, say, democratic ideology and start thinking like this, even if you're just considering the possibility, and then you turn back, what you see is a bunch of people looking at a screen that keeps saying equality over and over again. You can't believe it in the same way. Because now you see it as an image, not as real. And remember, they've been there since childhood. So to them, that's not the image of a tree, that's a tree. They've been there since childhood, so it's not that equality is a type of justice. Equality simply is justice. Well, we'll do a lot more about democracy later on. For now, do you see what Thrasymachus is saying?
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you this to see how much you get it. Why, if he's right, would the techne, the expertise of the sophist, be a very powerful techne? Where would its power lie? The sophist, of which he is an example, remember, is someone who teaches you to speak well, teaches you to persuade others. Why, if Thrasymachus is right about how politics works, how justice works, what role does the sophist have to play in this world?
Like they're gonna control the world.
Yeah, well, close. The king is going to control here, the rich are going to control here, the poor are going to control here, but there's a role for the sophist in every single one of those. What's his role? It's the same role. He won't be necessarily the powerful one, but he'll always be right next to the powerful one. Because the powerful one, or the powerful few, or the powerful many, they need the sophist. Why?
Let people believe.
Exactly. Every regime needs to persuade the subjects to do what's in the advantage of the rulers. And in every instance, the subjects are going to be losing in that equation. The rulers are going to be gaining. People don't like to lose, so they need to be tricked into losing. That's where the sophist comes in. He will become an expert in quote-unquote justice. And that's exactly what Thrasymachus is. He's an expert. This is what justice is. However, notice there's justice, so monarchic justice, the justice of the king. Oligarchic justice, the justice of the few. Yeah. Only the poor pay taxes, only the rich vote. Here, the rich pay taxes, the poor vote. Democratic justice. The content of justice will disagree, will be different. But, I'll do it underneath just to be clear. There's one meta-justice. And what is that? The advantage of the stronger. And in a kingdom, that's the monarchy. And in an oligarchy, that's the rich. And in a democracy, that's the poor. So there are these two layers to what he's saying. There's what justice will be in each kind of constitution, and then there's what it always is, which is the advantage of the stronger. Any questions? That's his view. There are 3 objections, and we've got 10 minutes at the most. I'm going to have to do them quickly, because we really should finish book 1. Why don't I just do them quickly, and then we'll stop. You can think about questions. Well, one of them is going to be easy for us to do, because it's appearance versus reality, just as we had with Polemarchus. So remember, I want to benefit her because she's my friend, but I'm mistaken about her. She's bad, and so I'm benefiting a bad person. Sorry. It was a random example. I'm harming him because he's my enemy, but he's actually good, so I'm harming a good person. We make mistakes. So too, rulers make mistakes. Kim Jong-un makes mistakes. He's the one ruler of North Korea, but he's not always right about what's to his advantage. Sometimes he makes policies that may cause a revolution, for example. Sometimes the rich make mistakes. That's why there are democratic revolutions. Sometimes the poor make mistakes about what's to their advantage. That might be why, if Plato's right, those kind of societies always end up in chaos. So, Socrates says, did you mean apparent advantage or real advantage? And this is very interesting. This took me 15 years of teaching Plato to see. I thought what Thrasymachus meant was apparent advantage. Because it's the king has an ideology of what seems just to him, and he teaches it through the sophists. So to the rich, so to the poor. And then he could just say, I mean apparent advantage. I don't care about reality. And the dialogue pauses, and the two people, Adimantus is one of them, and Cleitophon is the other. They say, he could say this, and then there wouldn't be a problem. And I always was wondering when I would read that, like, yeah, why doesn't he just say that? Because he comes out and says, no, I mean both, appearance and reality. What does that mean? Let's consider medicine. So remember you were sick in the examples? If I am not a doctor, and you're sick, like you have a sore stomach, I might think, probably you had some bad food. So it appears to me that the problem is bad food. But I'm not a doctor, so the way things seem to me usually don't line up with the way they are when it comes to bodies. He's a doctor. So when he hears you complaining about your sore stomach, he says, well, do you mind if I touch you? He touches you. Oh, it hurts right here. Can you breathe in? Does it hurt more? Yeah, it hurts a lot more when I breathe in. You got to get to the emergency room immediately. You have appendicitis. So it appeared differently to him than it appeared to me. It really was appendicitis. My appearance was not the same as reality. His appearance was the same as reality. That's what expertise is. Expertise is when the way things are is the way they seem to you. When your mind is in conformity with the world. Thrasymachus, the reason he wants to say both is he wants to say, I'm not talking about just anybody. I'm not talking about Kim Jong-un. I'm not talking about Donald Trump. I'm not talking about, Pericles. I'm talking about the best kind of ruler, the expert ruler. Just like the expert doctor, this will be someone who sees things the way they are. He knows what's to his advantage. And it took me 15 years or so to think, why does he say that? He's a teacher. These sophists, they weren't from Athens. They're from other places, and they would travel to Athens and then sell their expertise. He's coming to Athens and presenting himself as an expert. I, Thrasymachus, am an expert in the craft of ruling. The way things are is the way they seem to me. And you want to be the ruler of Athens? Come to my school. Give me 100,000 yen, and that will do for a week of lessons. You want to stay longer? Well, that'll be 1,000,000 yen. He's advertising himself to this crowd. He's proposing himself as the expert in rule, the one with the techne of rule. And that then sets up the final two objections, which I'll discuss. But before I do, are there any questions? Do you see why he wants to talk about craft of rule?
So he was a teacher, sophists?
Yes, they're teachers.
Okay.
They're teachers. Plato thinks they're fake teachers because they're teaching you how to become powerful, rich, and famous, regardless of what you have to do to get it. Socrates, by contrast, teaches you what real justice is. He's like the mathematician versus the advertiser. This craft, now, anytime you start talking about crafts, you're on Socrates' home field. He is preoccupied with knowledge. And crafts are organized knowledge for a purpose. And so once Thrasymachus says, I, Thrasymachus, am talking about the craft of ruling, then Socrates can say, well, look at all the other crafts. They always are for the advantage of the weaker. So you're a physician, and he had appendicitis. What were you attending to in your craft? His weak body. You were thinking, how can I make his weak body stronger? Or, I'm a carpenter. This is just a random pile of wood. It's weak in the sense of it's chaotic and disorganized. I'm going to apply the craft of carpentry and assemble it into something strong, a house. Here's a horse. It's a weak horse. I'll feed it good food, I'll train it with proper exercise, then it wins the race, and so on. Crafts go to weak things and make them stronger. They don't make the craftsman stronger, which is what he's saying justice is, the advantage of the stronger. And so he's caught because he wants to say simultaneously, justice is a craft, the advantage of the stronger, but all the other crafts attend to the weak. They don't attend to the self. But he's much more clever than Polemarchus. And he recognizes, wait a second, this is a trick. Because when you're the doctor and you minister to his weak body, what do you get after he's healthy? You don't do it for free. He pays you. So Thrasymachus is saying, you naive man, Socrates, doctors don't heal people for the sake of the people. They heal people for the sake of money. The carpenter doesn't deal with the wood for the sake of the wood. He deals with the wood for the sake of money. And so on for all the other crafts. And now this is the final point, and then I'll conclude. So, is there a craft that's for oneself? Such as money making or power winning? Because that's what Thrasymachus' craft is. You see, he hasn't been trapped. He's just been able to express himself more clearly. What he's been trying to say all along is that I, Thrasymachus, teach a special craft, a metacraft, which will make you rich and powerful. So money and power. Fame too, but let's just talk about money and power. I, Thrasymachus, can teach you how to become rich and powerful. That's my expertise. And Socrates has one last objection, and then I'll conclude. He says, can there be a craft of money making or a craft of power? Because none of the crafts are like that. So for example, if you're a physician and you test his body and you say it's appendicitis, and you're a physician and you test his body, if he's a good physician and you're a good physician, what will you find is the problem? If he said it's appendicitis.
Might be other disease.
Well, if he's a really good, like he's the best physician, he doesn't ever make a mistake, and he determined it's appendicitis, and you're the best physician, you never make mistakes, you're both the best, what will you find it to be? Let me make it easier for you. I assume appendicitis is very easy to diagnose. I think most doctors can just touch you, but let's say you take an x-ray and it's just very clear somebody has appendicitis. He did the x-ray, it's clearly appendicitis. He wants a second opinion, he comes to you, you do the x-ray, it's exactly the same image. What do you say? If you're the best physician.
That was right.
He's right. Because two experts, when something is real, will agree. You won't try to outdo each other. But what if I come and I say, wouldn't you like a third opinion? Because, I mean, appendicitis, come on. Come to my clinic and I have this fancy equipment and I put you through a CAT scan and I've got a white coat, they don't have a white coat, and I'm from Harvard, so the prestigious university, and I say, you have stomach cancer. Now, maybe they were bad physicians and I was right, but I set it up from the beginning, they're the best, and it's a very easy problem to diagnose. I come and I tell you it's stomach cancer, I'm trying to outdo them. Now I can't outdo them in reality because they were right, but how could I get you to submit to my treatment? My treatment's going to be a lot more expensive, by the way. So you don't want to submit to it, but then again, I'm telling you, you're going to die if you don't submit to my cancer treatment. You have to take all of these fancy medicines that were just discovered 10 years ago and so on. Aren't you impressed? I'm not going to speak this way, but my white coat, my Harvard degree, the fancy CAT scan machine, they're country doctors. You see, I'm trying to outdo them, not by attending to the reality, but by presenting an appearance. But if I did that, would I be a doctor? No, I'd be a quack, a charlatan. I'd be a fake. Real doctors don't try and outdo each other. Once one has the right answer, the other one's just going to want to say the same right answer. There's no competition. They're not competing with each other. They're competing with the world to understand it. Whereas I, who am not a real doctor, I come in and I'm competing with them because I'm not here attending to your body, I'm here for money. I'm a moneymaker, not a doctor. Money makers are in competition with each other necessarily. Doctors are not in competition with each other necessarily. So a real craft, there's no competition. These crafts, or whatever Thrasymachus wants, they're necessarily competitive. And so for now, book one more or less ends, Socrates wants to say that's not a real craft. He hasn't proven that. He's just shown it's different. Okay, so I've kept you over. So think about that, and as I did today, come back with questions about anything from book one. We're going to have to kind of press harder, so books 2 and 3 for next time.